You know, and I did that partly because I was interested in problems at a clinical level, but I was also, I started reading some, I took a psych course that was self-study, and I started reading some real psychologists, you know, in this self-guided reading course. I read original works by Carl Rogers and by Abraham Maslow, and I read The Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious by Jung, and I read The Interpretation of Dreams by Freud. Like, I was trying to pick out core texts in the history of psychological ideas, and you know, that was really helpful. I mean, there's nothing like reading original works by geniuses to provide you with some useful information. You know, it was extraordinarily useful reading. And I was reading Nietzsche at the same time, which was also really remarkable. I think I read most of what was published at that point by Nietzsche, and I tried to read it in chronological order, and it really blew me away. Man, that guy, I don't know what was up with him, but he could sure think. I mean, Nietzsche said at one point, I write in a sentence what it takes other people a whole book to say. It's like, that's a pretty hubristic and narcissistic comment, right? It's like, and then he tops it, he said, they can't even say it in a whole book. So, you know, I love that. And he was right too, that's the thing. He was right, you know, and Nietzsche was not in very good health, and so he'd think like mad and then write something down that summarized the thinking, because he didn't have the energy to run through the whole arguments. And so he said he liked to philosophize with a hammer, and it's like, yeah. I had a client recently who was raised as a Christian fundamentalist, and he was kind of cocky intellectually, and he's not a stupid guy, and he thought that he would, you know, take on Nietzsche intellectually, because he knew about Nietzsche's statement about the death of God, and so he read Nietzsche, and that was the end of his Christianity. It's like, you know, you got to watch who you pick on, you know, and he's not a good guy to pick on, because he's a lot smarter than you, and, you know, a lot smarter than almost everyone. He was an amazing person. And so I was reading Nietzsche, and I was reading Dostoevsky, and I was reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn at the same time, and Solzhenitsyn wrote this book called The Gulag Archipelago, which is like the second volume of that book. It's just, he memorized the book in a prison camp in Russia. And the book is, I believe it's 2,400 pages long. And it's written in like 7-point type. It's a major league book. And, you know, he didn't have much pen and paper in the Gulag camps, and he spent a lot of time thinking about why he was in there and why Russia was basically, the whole economy was basically predicated on slave labor, and it was absolutely murderous. So, and the second volume of that series, it escaped from Russia in 1975. It was brought over in a bad translation and circulated in the West long before it was available in Russia. I tell you, once that book was published, 1975, there was no being a Marxist anymore. He just demolished the claims of the Marxist left to its moral credibility. He just demolished it, and rightly so. And it's an amazing book, The Gulag Archipelago, but it's a walk through a very deep swamp, and it's a remarkable book because it's like reading someone who's screaming in outrage at the top of their lungs for 2,400 pages, you know.